I know I'm probably gonna get like a lot of hate for this one, but at this point, I don't really care. It needs to be said. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today is the July 2024 wrap-up. So everything I read in July with the ratings. I actually got a lot of reading done in July. I was really surprised. Honestly, work slowed down for a brief period of time, and I was able to breathe and relax, and instead of, I don't know, cleaning or whatever, all the projects I have going on and everything, I just read more books, which was exactly what I wanted to do in the moment. So, can't really complain that much. Work has picked back up for me, and I'm tired again. You guys can tell I'm a little bit sick. I don't know who gets sick in the middle of the summer, but here I am. Just try to ignore it, okay? Before we get into it, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. If you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. Let's take a moment to go over my rating system real quick, and then we will get started. 5 stars obviously means best of the best. I absolutely loved it. I'll recommend it to anybody and everybody. No notes. 4 stars means I still really liked it, but it had some minor issues, like maybe character issues, plot holes, something like that. Not enough for me to dislike it, but enough that it did not get the 5-star rating. 3 stars means I did not like it, but it was a subjectivity issue, which means I could absolutely see somebody else liking it, and I will still recommend it, but for whatever reason, this book was not for me. 2 stars means I did not like it, and I will not recommend it. I really didn't like it. I didn't have a good time. I probably should have DNF'd it, and I won't recommend it to anybody. 1 star is the absolute worst of the worst. It's probably, the book had to have been so bad that I might not read the author ever again. I usually reserve my 1-star ratings for books that encourage grooming, that have lots of racism, homophobia, xenophobia, anything along those lines. And then again, anything that fantasizes grooming underage children or any kind of abuse to somebody, those are my 1-star books. No 1 stars today, but I thought I would just go into it a little bit. So, let's not waste any more time, let's get into it. Okay, so the first book I read in July was Winter Counts by David Heska Wanbli Weiden. This book exceeded all of my expectations, okay? If you go back and watch the Maybe series, I was super excited about this book, but I do remember when I was talking about it that I was expecting something different. And I was expecting something different, but I was not disappointed in what I got. So, premise. This follows an indigenous man that lives on reservation. And he's sort of like the Batman of the reservation, okay? But he doesn't wear a mask or anything like that. It's not that serious. But he is basically the paid vigilante for the community. So, when something happens and a crime has occurred and it falls through the cracks of the legal system, people will literally pay him to right that wrong, okay? Somewhere along the way, his nephew ends up getting tangled up in a drug scheme that is happening on the reservation, and it becomes his job to not only keep his nephew out of trouble, but to follow the lead of how drugs got onto the reservation in general and how he's going to stop it, okay? He's literally hired by, I think, the chief of the reservation to go find out how the drugs are getting onto the reservation, into the hands of the youths in the community. Along the way, we're getting a lot of side characters, a lot of side stories, and a lot of really great conversations about indigenous culture, specifically this tribe. I'm sorry, I can't remember. I'm going to put it up here. I did this one on audiobook, and I actually got the physical book too, so I sort of switched on and off, but the audiobook was done really well. I love the voice actor that they chose to play this. I think it was really well done. There were so many great conversations happening in this book, not just about the legal system on reservations and how federal agencies interact with indigenous tribes and things like that. There's tons of conversations, about how things work within the tribe, like the hierarchy. There's also lots of conversations about funding and starting new programs, which is things that people don't hear about that often. I tend to hear about them a little bit more because my stepmother is actually Kiowa and she works within the tribe, and she'll tell me lots of things about grant money and things like that. And so I've taken it upon myself to sort of pay attention to things like that happen just because it's come into my orbit. But if it's not something that's come into your orbit naturally, they take a lot of time explaining things like that and explaining how programs like these and the politics within the tribe can be very tedious and difficult to navigate, and a lot of times the money that is granted to the tribe is not always given to what it's granted for. We also have lots of diversity in this book, lots of conversations about what it means to be part of the tribe and what it means to feel like an outsider when you're living with these people for literally your whole life. I also talk a lot about like code switching in this book, which I thought those conversations were really interesting. And of course, they talk a lot about addiction in this book because it is sort of a heavy thread, not only in indigenous cultures, but in this book specifically because we are dealing with like a drug pandemic or epidemic basically within their community. Lots of cool stuff happening in this book, and there was no point in time where I was bored or where I wanted to look away or put it down. I was sucked in right away and I could not get out of this book. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. There was actually some gory bits in this book that I really, really liked, and the whole opening of this book was exactly what I was wanting. There were so many beautiful moments in this book, and I absolutely had a great time. The next book I read in July was Murder in the Family by Cara Hunter. Okay, so I talked about this in the Maybe series as well because this one has a really interesting format. It's basically written like a screenplay or like almost like a transcript, like an audio transcript. It's sort of written like that. So basically this whole book, the premise of the book is that there's this family and the stepdad dies very mysteriously and under a lot of suspicion, right? It's obviously a murder, but they can't figure out who did it and why they did it and all these other things. And so at the center of this are these 3 children, one of whom is very young. As he grows up, he's now like in his 20s, he decides that he wants to pitch this true crime TV show to this director about solving this murder for his family. And so he's actually a part of the investigation, and 2, the money or the idea behind producing this true crime TV show. It ends up being like 6 episodes or something like that. And so the guy that decides to produce the show is like, I'm gonna get all of these true crime people to come in and do the show. So it's like a couple detectives, a journalist, a psychologist, all these people, and he pulls them all together, and you read the book like you're watching the episode of the show. So you're getting all of the evidence at the same time that all of these people, this true crime collective, are getting it. It's almost like you're sitting there watching it, like you're tuning into the episode and you're trying to piece it all together at the same time that these professionals are also trying to piece it together. And at the end of the day, they're all trying to solve the murder of this young man's stepdad that happened, I think it was like 20 years prior. So what did I think of it? Okay, the formatting, A+ on the formatting because it was really cool and it was a lot of fun. It was really quick to read. It was really easy to digest. And I think that it really helped with the pacing. It never felt slow and it always felt interesting because along the same lines as we're getting episode, like we're watching it, we're also getting tidbits of information on the side from like text messages that we're able to read between some of the other people, emails that we're also able to read between some of the professionals and the producers and things. So there's lots of little extras that we're getting. So we're not just an outside audience, we're also getting a lot of insight from the inside of the inner circle. Things I didn't like. Well, there were a lot of red herrings. If you're one of those people that is okay with things like that, go ahead, you'd probably really like it. Red herrings to me are so annoying, especially when we're talking about getting up to 8 to 10 in one book. I feel like at that point it's too many, and that you're just sort of running out of gotchas at that point. That did feel very heavy when I was getting towards the end of the book. Like, how many more false starts are we going to get? How much longer are you going to put this off? Like, and it did really feel like TV when they're like, ooh, what about this? Ooh, what about that? And you're just left hanging. And then at the end, you're like, it wasn't even any of those things. Why did you bring up any of those things? Well, it's for ratings, right? And that's what it felt like when I was reading it. It felt like I was part of some TV show rating experiment, okay? At the end of the day, there was so much weighted into each of these characters in a way that didn't make sense to me. They were asking us to care so much about these characters when they were literally giving us nothing on them. And I just couldn't make myself care about so many people. I mean, this was a pretty dense cast when you look at it. I mean, I think we have like 5 or 6 people that are on the like actual team of professionals that's trying to solve the case, and then we have the son, and then the siblings, and then the mom, the stepdad that died. And then we have all of these outside people that they're interviewing and stuff like that. It was a really heavy cast. So to make us like invest our time in these professionals when we weren't really given enough depth to invest in them, okay? Again, this kind of circles back to the red herrings where I was like, I don't know why you were trying to force me to care about these people when you didn't really follow up with any of it. I felt like at times Cara Hunter was really wanting me to put more work into it than she did, if that makes any sense. I can't say that I was terribly satisfied with the ending. I felt like we came a really long way for very little, honestly, if I'm being honest. And I just felt like there were so many plot holes by the end. Not really plot holes, because they did tie everything up pretty well, but like there were just so many loose ends that I was like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? What happens now? You know, it really did just cut off very abruptly. And then I just felt like we didn't really get any closure on like the millions of other threads that they were pulling during this investigation. So I think the formatting was really cool, really fun. I thought there was a lot of really great stuff on the page. I think it didn't work plot-wise. I felt like it just did not really come to a great conclusion. I thought the ending was not that surprising, and it was not that dynamic, honestly. For how many hoops that we were jumping throughout the whole thing, I was not really expecting this drop in the end. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I will say, if you're going to read this, do not do it on your Kindle, as a lot of people in like the comment sections on the reviews said that the formatting does not work. I read it like in book format and it was fine, you know, but there are like a lot of little articles and stuff that if it was on your Kindle, it would probably be very hard to read. This might have been me, but it was kind of a collective in the reviews where either people really, really liked it because the formatting was exciting and new, or that they struggled with it and it didn't really work that well. So yeah, will I read Cara Hunter again? Probably, yeah. And then I can, you know, definitively say if it was just the writing for me that wasn't working. But I had a good time while I was reading it, but I was disappointed. I told you all at the end of last week that I had a book that I did not like, and that this was probably going to give me some controversy because this is a very well-liked author, but I do not like this author. I have drawn my conclusion. I am done. This is the one that's going to take up the majority of the time today. It is Never Lie by Freida McFadden, and I did not have a good time while reading this. So let's start with the premise before I, you know, get to my opinions on this book. We have this couple that is going to see a house that they potentially want to buy. They're newlywed. They're in a snowstorm. They get to the house, and immediately when they get there, they think something is not right. There's no lights on in the house. Their realtor is not there. They walk in, and it looks like no one is there waiting for them. Snow is coming in. They barely got there. They decide they can't leave, so they have to stay. As they're moving around the house, looking around, you know, they come to the realization that this house belonged to a very famous psychologist that very publicly went missing not that long ago, and there was like a lot of controversy surrounding her disappearance, etc., etc. They decide to stay for the night, but before the wife goes to bed, she ends up finding a secret pile of tapes that are recordings of the psychologist or psychiatrist with her patients. And as she's sifting through the tapes and as she's in the house at night, she's realizing, one, that they're probably not in the house alone, and two, that something very bad has happened in that house. That's all I'm going to give on the premise because I really don't want to get too much more into it in case any of you are wanting to read it, and I don't like to give spoilers on my channel. Let's move into what I thought about this book. Okay, first of all, this is not my first Freida McFadden book. The last Freida McFadden book I read was The Housemaid. I think that's the blue one, okay? The first one in the series. When I tell y'all I was so unimpressed with that book. Okay. This was chosen for my book club, by the way, because I would not have willingly picked up another Freida McFadden book because I was so burned by the last one that I read. Okay, this was chosen for my book club, and I was like, I have to read it. I'm the leader of the book club. This is my job, basically. But I went into it thinking, okay, I remember what the last Freida McFadden book was like. But in my head, I was like, don't hold that against her, Some authors don't put out all winners, okay? That's why I've mentioned this on my channel before. I always give books like 2-3 chances, authors 2 or 3 chances before I'm like, okay, this isn't for me. Because I don't think you can judge an author based on one book. Not every book is going to fit every reader. So I figured that's just what happened with Freida McFadden. And everybody loves this author. I don't know how many times I see on social media people just revving up Freida McFadden. And I'm like, it must have just been the book I read. It must have just been The Housemaid, okay? Maybe that wasn't her best book, all right? This one has been getting a lot of buzz. Everybody's been talking about it, talking about how awesome it was. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. I have to read it. So, I was excited. And I set my expectations, low, because I didn't want to be disappointed. And I was like, let's just go into it like any other book and we'll see how it goes. I ended up doing this on audiobook, which I do think the audio was done pretty well. It was really engaging and fast-paced, so I did like that. Right away when we were opening the book, I do not like the female main character. There was something really weird about her, like the way that she was just overly fawning over her new husband, that just made me want to puke in my mouth a little bit. So we'll start with that. At no point in the book did I ever connect with this character. There was not ever really a point where I changed my mind about her or I felt like I liked her more. If anything, I just liked her less progressively as we were going on. There were a lot of red herrings in this book, which, compared to the last book, the Murder in the Family book, this did not have that many red herrings, so, I was okay with it. And we were also getting this dual perspective in this book of, them in the house now in present time, and then we're also getting, the psychiatrist part of the story, it might have been a year or so before her disappearance, and so we're kind of getting a lead up of events of what's happening with her in relation to this couple being in her house all this time later after her disappearance. This book had so much potential, but the more that we went on, I could see that Freida McFadden was not going to build it up to its potential. We just kept steering away from the direction I thought we were going to go. And then there was a really big twist, 3/4 of the way through the book. And I was super excited because I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Didn't see that coming. I love it when a twist catches me by surprise. And then the book really just ended. And I'm like, okay. And right away, when I finished, I was like, okay, that wasn't that bad of a book. But I always let things sit for a little bit. By the time that I had woke up the next morning after thinking about this book all night and most of the morning the next morning, and then I just kept thinking about it the rest of the day, the more I hated this book. I started to pick it apart and it literally all unraveled in my hands, and I was just very, very, very disappointed. Okay, I love a big twist in a book. I do. But the twist has to make sense. I read this book. The twist was there. I quickly finished it. And I remember thinking That was pretty good, but I don't feel right about it. Like, something felt off about the book to me. So, like I said, I sat on it and everything. The next day, when I thought about it, I went back and listened to the first part of the book. When you apply, in a good thriller, when you apply the twist, the plot twist, and then you go back and you start the book again, if you want to, the rest of the book should make more sense to you with the additional knowledge of the twist at the end, right? With all of this knowledge of what happens, everything should just be so glaringly obvious. Like, oh my gosh, this all fits so perfectly. Now it makes sense. When I went back and looked at the beginning of this book after finishing it, literally none of it made sense. None of it made sense. What do you mean? This big twist happened, and then I go back and I'm like, why? This doesn't make any sense. It did not make any sense, and I'm telling you it didn't make any sense, and if you argue with me in the comments, I'm gonna call you a liar because it didn't make sense. Because she didn't do her work, okay? Freida McFadden did not do the work in this book. And I think that's the thing that frustrated me the most, because I think if she had done the work, it could have made sense. It could have made sense, but it didn't. There are also so many things about this book that if she had done it differently, it would have made more sense, but instead it made less sense. And there were a lot of very big plot points in the book that just were blown so completely out of proportion that they didn't make sense in reality. Maybe if we were in a vacuum, this book would work. And here's the thing. When I hear people talking about Freida McFadden, they always say the same thing. They're like, I'm here to have a good time. Me too, okay? I don't see how this was a good time. And people will always say about Freida McFadden is that I got through it so fast, it was so easy, the plot twist was so much fun. Okay, I think that people equate reading books really quickly to them being a really good book. And there's not a correlation there, okay? Reading a book quickly doesn't have anything to do with whether the book was good or not. It just has to mean that it was easy to read and the pace was fast. Which I can see how people would equate that to the book being good, but I just don't understand. I don't understand Freida McFadden cult fans, okay? And there are people that are just like, if you wanted a complicated book, it's not going to be by Freida McFadden. Books don't need to be complicated to be good. I don't know. I feel like I could go in a circle about this for a long time. I think that people that like this author, you can't change their mind about them not being a good author. And this is really one of those things. Like, literally, there are people in my book club that love Freida McFadden, and then there were people in my book club that thought this book was garbage. And it's one of those things where people are like, I just like her books because they're easy. Okay. And who am I to say that you're not allowed to like it? You're allowed to like whatever you want. That's fine. I don't like it, and you're not going to change my mind, just like you like it, and I'm probably not going to change your mind. It's definitely one of those instances where it is quantity over quality with this author, in my opinion. She writes a crap ton of books, okay? And I think they all have the same blueprint, which is female characters that have absolutely no personality so that you can just imprint on them and be ready to go. I think that it is fast-paced, which means that it keeps you in the moment but doesn't tell you anything, and it has a really big twist, optional of whether it works for the story or not. It just has to be big. You just can't see it coming. It could literally be anything, okay? And the fans will be like, that was the best book that I've ever read. You could come at me and say that she got killed by a fish with a peanut butter allergy, and people would be like, yes, that makes perfect sense. No, it doesn't. It doesn't really. But as long as we can read it fast enough to not think about it too long, it's a hit, right? So, yeah. I think that this was my last Freida McFadden book. In all honesty, I don't think I need to see anything else. These two books are rated so high. The two books that I've read by her are rated so high by so many people that if this is her best work, I'm not really interested in what else there is. I don't know. You guys can think whatever you want about me for having that opinion. I was severely disappointed because I think this book had so much potential. I think it had a lot of cool stuff happening in it. I think that the bones were pretty good. I think the twist made no sense. I thought the characters were done so shallowly that I couldn't even tell you. The female main character literally had no depth at all. and she was written so poorly compared to her storyline. I don't know how else to put that if you haven't read the book. I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for it, but whatever, it doesn't matter. I've said all I'm gonna say, so let's move on. I gave it 2 stars in case you were wondering. Okay, the next book I read was The Hike by Lucy Clarke. Okay, if you remember back to the Maybes episode for July, I wanted to read The Castaways by Lucy Clarke, okay? Let me tell you, I don't know what the deal is with this book, but you cannot get it anywhere. I tried the library, which is my first choice always. Then I tried my audiobooks. I tried Libby, even tried Amazon to like purchase the book, like do the digital read. No. And then I was like, I'll try Audible. I have a friend that has Audible, and I was like, can you see if you can find this book on Audible for me? Because I felt like I was losing my mind. That like maybe this book didn't really exist. And I couldn't figure out why I literally couldn't find it anywhere. Anywhere. Not just for to like check out, but like even to purchase. I could not find this book anywhere. And so she looked on Audible, and she ended up getting a better answer than me. And it ended up saying that this book was not for sale in print or audio in your country. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what country you can buy it in, because I figured in the US it wouldn't be limiting at all. Like, it's pretty easy to find everything you need here. I don't really know what the deal is with that. If you live in a different country besides the US and you can get this book here, please let me know if it's any good. I don't know what the deal is, but apparently you can't get it in America. So for some reason, I was really set on reading Lucy Clarke. Like I said, she's been on my lineup a lot. People really like her writing. So I went to the next book, which if you remember back to the Maybes episode, I talked about reading this one, but the Castaways looked better. So I read The Hike by Lucy Clarke. And it is about 4 friends that are in their 30s. They're at very different points in their lives, okay? One of them has kids and is with her husband, but they're about to separate. One is childless and has a fabulous high-power career. One is separated from her husband and has a single child and is a small business owner. And one is a literal rock star, okay? But despite them being at different points in their lives, at being different points across the globe, in the country, whatever, they always put together a girls' vacation, and they do it every year without fail. So this year, the mom that is separating from her husband, she's a doctor, and she decided, you know what, I want to go and hike in I think it's Swedish mountainside, okay? And this hike is supposed to be like beginner-ish friendly, but they also were supposed to be like training to go on this hike, like once she figured out that's where she wanted to go. So they all meet at the end, and they're getting ready to go, and on their way to go, they keep getting told like there's, people die up there, someone died there last year, there's a bad energy about this mountain, don't go, you're unprepared. Decide to go, and at some point they get stranded there, and they know that somebody is following them up the mountainside, and we get to follow along and see who comes down from the mountain. So right away, scene setting, the whole idea of the book, the character development was all so very good in this book. I felt like I knew each of these characters inside and out. They had a beautiful friendship, and it wasn't all ups though. There were a lot of downs within the friendship of, their circle and everything. And each of them had their own very strong personality, and I just fell in love with this group of women. Also, people comment a lot on Lucy Clarke being a very atmospheric writer, and I do agree with that. I felt very in tune with where we were, and it felt very beautiful and alive, and I loved that aspect of the story. When we get to the thriller aspect of this story, it was not quite thriller-ish enough for me. I felt like it was lacking a little bit. This would not go in my top thrillers, okay? Because it just didn't have enough thrill to it, if you ask me. There was just a lot of points in the book where I thought we were maybe going to get more into a supernatural vibe for this book, and it never got there, because that was not the point of the book, and that was not the vibe of the book. So I felt a little misdirected there for no reason. And like I said, the thriller aspect of it was not quite as thrilling as I was hoping. and it ended up dissolving itself a little too easily, if you ask me. I ended up giving this 4 stars because, like I said, atmospheric writing, yes, and then the characters were done so well. I absolutely loved these women, and I loved their stories. And the reason I couldn't give the 5 stars was because it was not truly a thriller. It did not feel truly thrillerish to me, and that sort of knocked it down a peg. But I still really recommend this book, and I will read Lucy Clarke again. Okay, this is the last book I read. It's The Beast by Katee Robert. Basically, I had some time left at the end of the month, and I had been thinking about reading this book over the summer, and so I just downloaded it really quick, and I read it, and I basically read it in 2 days. It was so easy, and I had a lot of fun reading it. So let's get into the premise. If you don't know who Katee Robert is, or you don't know what the Wicked Villains series is, the Wicked Villains series is basically Disney princess gets the villain, or the villain gets the girl. It's very smutty. It's for 18 and only up, I would say. The first one in the series is Desperate Measures, which is Jasmine and Jafar. This is The Beast. Obviously, that's going to be a play on Belle, the Beast, and Gaston. So, to me, this had a lot of the same vibes as Desperate Measures and Learn My Lesson if you put them together. So, but in Learn My Lesson, the reason I didn't love that book as much is because I thought the three-way couple or throuple between Meg, Hades, and Hercules was not very well balanced. I felt like Hercules really didn't feel like a part of them. He was just sort of there being an overbearing ruler, if you will. So if you liked the idea of Learn My Lesson, but you felt like it was lacking in like the cohesiveness of the group, this has really great cohesion. Isabelle, which is the female character, and Beast and Gaston are all really well balanced. I will say I did not like Isabelle's character that much. I felt like I couldn't understand her. Like, there was so much fluctuation within how she was feeling all the time that I felt like, what is going on? Do you want to be here or not? That's what I asked myself so many times. Are you here because you want to be or not? I found myself asking that quite a bit up until the very end of the novel. I felt like I was getting mixed signals from Isabelle, and I just didn't really know why she was there. Well, I knew why she was there, but it was just like, I don't know. It got to be a lot at some point, but to me, the 2 main stars of this book were the men, and I absolutely loved them on the page, both separate and together. I thought they were just a fire, and I was rooting for them the whole way. They were both introduced in the previous novel, which is, now I can't remember what it's called, but it's the Hook and Tinkerbell book. And I knew when they were on the page together that I was excited about the possibilities for the book that was going to have the 2 of them in it, and this book really delivered. The reason I say it reminds me some of Desperate Measures is because it does have a lot of non-con play in it, which is not my favorite kind of play, but I know that lots of other people enjoy that. Overall, I really liked this book. It did open up a lot of possibility again for the next book at the end. I loved the 2 men on the page together. Isabelle, like, I came around to liking her, but I did feel like I struggled with her a lot throughout the book. The smut scenes in this book were really well done. I had so much fun reading that. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and again, it would have gotten 5 stars if there had been less non-con play, and if Isabelle had been a little bit more, I don't know, easier to digest right away. But she really was a struggle for me. She might not have been for everybody, but I did struggle with her. So 4 stars, that is the 4th book. I'm making my way through that series, and they just keep getting better. I feel like if you read Desperate Measures and you thought like the writing was a little bit underdeveloped or not, you know, the plot wasn't that great or whatever, Katee Robert has continued to just flourish and get better with her writing. I feel like this book, book 4, is so different in her style and pace and just what she ends up putting in. Like, the overall plot and arc of the book is so much bigger and better than anything that she did in Desperate Measures. So if you read that book and you think, well, it was okay, she has just continued to get better. with her writing. And I think this is just like a great example of like where people start and how people keep growing as they move on in their journey. So yeah, I had a great time. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. 5 books! That was so many for me. Like, I usually read like 3, and it's usually a struggle. But yeah, 5 books. I'm so proud of myself. That will probably be the biggest month of the year, because I've already got my my life is just stacking up already, and the school year has not officially started yet, but I'm already busy. I'm just trying to take everything one day at a time at this point and not get too overwhelmed, but we shall see. I've already started my lineup for August. I've already dug in. I'm about halfway done with one of my books I'm super excited about. But yeah, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. And let me know if you've read any of these books, if you liked any of these books, or if you're adding them to your TBR. What are you reading in August? Are you excited about what you're reading? Leave me a comment. Tell me all the things. I love hearing from you guys. And I will see you all next time. Bye.